So they're all telling us that we've got to be our most authentic self, right? But what the hell does that mean, and where do I start? First off, if you're new here, I talk about my mental health and well-being, how I try and strive in my life in spite of some of the difficult emotions and things that I feel. I talk a lot about like anxiety and other issues that I face as somebody who's sensitive and emotional. And if that feels like it might be something of benefit to you, then I'd really like you to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you know each and every time I post a video. So everyone keeps chucking it at us, right? You need to be your most authentic self. Does anybody even really know what that means, right, when they're chucking it at us? Because I think a lot of us feel like we want to be our most authentic self, right? But we have no idea where to start or even what it means. So the first thing that I would say when it comes to being our most authentic selves is that you're never fully going to get there. So make being your most authentic self the journey, not the destination. When you make it the destination, I think it's a target that you're never going to reach. So it's about becoming our most authentic selves, and the key word there being becoming. For me, I do think there is a lot of benefit in living our lives as close as we can to who we're really supposed to be. When I feel like I achieve that, and when I feel like I'm really in that, I do feel whole. I feel like I connect better with people. I feel like people connect better with me, and I feel like I have much more value in the world when I'm portraying who I was always meant to be. Why would somebody like me reach my 30s with a feeling like I'm not being my most authentic self? And for me, you have to start at a place of questioning why you started to hide who you really were from yourself and from other people. And I believe this goes right back to when we were children. So Gabor Mate talks a lot about when our need for attachment is threatened, authenticity is what gets lost, right? That's not the full quote, but that is the gist of what he says, right? And what that means is that when we feel like we may lose attachment for being who we really are, we will be who we need to be to make sure that we get the attachment. So authenticity loses out. Now, this plays out in lots of different ways. If you grew up in an environment where, let's say you had a mum and dad who'd never really dealt with anger in a proper way, when you get angry as a child, they will scold you for being angry, and then you start to learn that when you're angry, your parents don't like you or they don't love you in the way that you want. And so what are you going to do as a child? You will suppress the angry outbursts, right? And try to show up what you need to be for them to be attached to you, so you won't get angry. Another example, good example actually, is young boys. Most young boys, and actually girls to some varying degree as well, when we're sensitive, we are often told by our loved ones and caregivers from a loving place. This isn't about being bad parents or anything like that, but we're often told that we're too sensitive and that we're too emotional, right? And so when we're told these things, we, as children, we will start to believe and get the instinct that if we are emotional or too overly sensitive, we're not going to get the attachment that we crave, and so we change that. We bury that sensitive side of us, that real, true part of who we really are. We bury that and become what we feel we need to be to make sure that we get the love and the attachment. And that is how our lives, I believe, will start to play out over our lives, right? For me, my story is that I was sensitive, I have always been like quite an emotional, thoughtful and deep person, and for a number of different reasons when I was younger, masculinity being one of them, and what I believed it was to be a man, I believed that I shouldn't have been those things. So I hid those things, right? I suppressed them things down, and I became something different in order to get attachment, acceptance, and all that kind of stuff from everybody. That happened when I was very young. That happened when I was a teenager in my peers. And when we are teens, we're very sensitive to wanting that attachment and acceptance from our peers, right? So we will again hide certain parts of us. So the world that we live in and that we evolve in teaches us what we need to be and do to get attachment. And in today's world, there's lots of information always coming out that we're always being fed through social media and through adverts, through TV, but also through the adults that and the people that we interact with, right? We're always being told about what we need to be, and if we feel like our attachment and our love and our acceptance is going to be threatened by who we really are, then that authenticity always loses. So this is why when we do become our most authentic selves, we do start to feel much more whole and much more connected. Because when we are accepted for who we truly are, that's when there's going to be full meaning in the connections that we make. The bonds that we have are going to be much more powerful because they're going to be based truly on who our authentic selves are. So understanding why we lose our most authentic selves can give us the power to then go on to want to change that and become who we really are. Now that takes some searching. For me, I do lots of morning routines of listening to myself talk. I've done inner child work, which has really helped me to reconnect with who I was before I started to disconnect, in my search for attachment. And then I've had to come out, right? And what I mean by that is my healing journey has been a series of coming out, a series of holding my hands up to people and saying, do you know what? For however long it's been that I've been portraying myself as X, Y, or Z, right now I don't feel like I'm any of those things, and actually I'm this. And so the biggest thing that I ever did was when I came out of a place where I was about to take my own life, and I said to everybody, I am not the person that I've claimed to have been, you know. What I found out about myself is that actually I'm quite shy, and I've always acted the opposite to that. But the real me is quite introverted. But to be around people, I need to be a certain, I have to also use some of the coping strategies that I've used to show up in the world. Because what I found is at the moment that if I was my true and real most authentic self, I wouldn't leave the house. I would stay at home, I'd sit in a room, dark with the curtains shut, right, and just be on my own, because like I'm very shy and introverted at my core. When you take away every other part of me, I'm shy and I'm introverted, and I'm not this outgoing person. I find it exhausting being around people, right, and all those things. So to say that we should be our most authentic selves all the time is unrealistic. And this is why I think that we should take parts of us that we've built to be able to go out in the world and actually use them to our advantage. So my ability to be able to show up and put on the ego sides of me, if you want to call them that, to be able to go and do the things that I do, is actually quite important and actually part of who I am. At first, when I started doing it, when I started realizing my true selves and much more of who the authentic part of me was, I felt that when I went and showed, you know, I'm a slightly different person when I go and play football to what I am when I go and speak at a mental health conference, right? And I thought, well, I'm being a fraud somewhere along the line here, right? So I had this guilt around it. But what actually I started to realize is that it actually just means that I'm quite good at adapting when I do them with awareness. So if I'm a certain person when I'm at football and a certain person when I'm at a conference, if I'm blind to that, I'm going to feel confused, I'm going to feel guilty, I'm going to feel shame, I'm going to feel like I'm a fraud. If I'm doing it with awareness and compassion for the reason why I'm doing it, then it's less detrimental, and actually it's closer to my most authentic self. So for me, being your most authentic self is about becoming as close to as you can. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey, and it's about learning about ourselves. And what's really important is to understand that as I grow, then my most authentic self changes, and it's like I'm like an animal that sheds my skin and kind of grows and evolves all the time, and I have to be open to that, right? And I have to understand that just because who I am today is not the same as who I am 6 months ago, it doesn't mean that 6 months ago I was a fraud. It means that 6 months ago I was being the person I needed to be at that stage of my life. So there needs to be self-compassion when we're talking about being our most authentic selves, and it cannot come from an angle of beating ourselves up for being a fraud. I hope that's been helpful. I may do more on being our most authentic self because it's such a big topic, and actually for me there's loads of unraveling to do within it, but it's a much more of a like 40-minute, 50-minute, 1 hour talk, and perhaps I'll do something on that in the future. But if this has been helpful, then I'd really like for you to like the video. And like I said at the beginning, I'd love to have you on board and subscribe so that you can see more of the content that I'm putting out in the future, and I'll see you next week.